It was free. That's what they said. No catch, no price, just free. Microsoft handed you a brand new operating system and asked for nothing in return. Hundreds of millions of people downloaded it in the first 24 hours. It felt generous. It felt like Microsoft had finally decided to do something good. They hadn't. Inside that free upgrade was a telemetry system logging your keystrokes, your location, your search history, every app you opened, every file you touched, sent to Microsoft's servers, by default, without asking you. Within 8 hours of a fresh install, Windows 10 had already contacted Microsoft's servers over 5,500 times. Before you'd done anything wrong, before you'd agreed to anything you understood, the free gift was reporting back to the store it came from. Then came forced updates that restarted your PC mid-presentation, bloatware that reinstalled itself after you deleted it, ads injected into the start menu of an OS you already owned. And by Windows 11, Microsoft was testing advertisements inside File Explorer, the tool you use to navigate your own files. You paid for the computer, you paid for the license, and they still found a way to make you the product. So a group of anonymous developers built a version of Windows that removes all of it. No telemetry, no bloatware, no forced updates, no ads, no surveillance, just the OS, doing what you tell it to do. They called it AtlasOS, and this time free actually meant free. Windows wasn't always like this. Windows XP launched in 2001. It was fast. It was stable. You bought it, you owned it, and Microsoft stayed out of your way. That was the deal. Windows 7 was even better. Released in 2009, it became the most beloved operating system ever built. At its peak, it ran on over 1.2 billion devices. Businesses built entire infrastructures around it. Gamers swore by it. Developers lived in it. It was clean, reliable, and completely under your control. The promise was simple. You pay for the software. The software works for you. Microsoft doesn't get involved after the sale, and it worked. Windows generated over $20 billion a year in licensing revenue. Office was a global standard. The company was worth hundreds of billions. They had a monopoly, a loyal user base, and a product people genuinely loved. Then someone in Redmond looked at what Google was doing with Android, harvesting behavioral data, building ad profiles, monetizing attention, and decided that $20 billion a year wasn't enough. They didn't need to build a better product. They already had the dominant one. They just needed to find a way to extract more from the people already using it. The decision they made next would betray every person who'd ever trusted them with their computer, and they'd wrap it in a bow and call it a gift. Because the most dangerous betrayal isn't the one that comes with a warning, it's the one that comes free. And in July 2015, they delivered it. July 29th, 2015. Microsoft pushed Windows 10 to 14 million devices in the first 24 hours. They called it the last version of Windows you'd ever need. Buried in the terms of service, in the pages nobody reads, was a clause that changed everything. Microsoft reserved the right to collect typed characters, voice input, touch input, handwriting, and full telemetry data from your device. Not opt-in, not a premium feature, on by default. For everyone, from day one. The numbers don't lie. Windows 10 contacted Microsoft's servers over 5,500 times in the first 8 hours on a fresh install. Even with telemetry set to basic, the lowest available setting, it still transmitted identifiable user data, and there was no setting to turn it off completely. That option simply didn't exist. They didn't forget to add it, they chose not to. Then came the forced updates. Microsoft removed your ability to delay or decline them. Your computer would restart mid-work, mid-game, mid-presentation, because Microsoft's update schedule mattered more than whatever you were doing. What they promised? Windows 10 is designed to be the most personal Windows ever. What they delivered, an operating system that reported your behavior back to its creator without your knowledge or consent. That's not a bug. That's a product decision, made by people in a room who decided your privacy was worth less than their data pipeline, and they were betting you'd never find out, or that if you did, you wouldn't have anywhere else to go. They were wrong on both counts. If you thought Windows 10 was bad, Microsoft saw the backlash and doubled down. Windows 11 launched in October 2021. It required a Microsoft account just to set up your own computer. Not suggested, required. Your personal machine, gated behind a corporate login before you could use it. Then came the ads, not on websites, not in apps, inside Windows itself. Microsoft began testing advertisements inside the Start menu, inside File Explorer, inside the Settings app. They were turning the operating system into a storefront. You were the inventory. According to Microsoft's own annual report, their advertising revenue crossed $12 billion in 2023, fueled in part by behavioral data harvested from Windows users. Every search, every app launch, every file you opened, feeding a machine that sold your attention to the highest bidder, and then came Recall, Microsoft's AI feature that took screenshots of everything you did on your computer every few seconds and stored it in a searchable database. Your banking, your messages, your passwords, your private conversations, all of it, photographed, indexed, stored. Security researchers called it a keylogger built into the OS. Privacy advocates called it the most dangerous feature ever shipped in a consumer product. The backlash was immediate and explosive. Microsoft paused the rollout. They didn't cancel it, they didn't apologize, they just said they'd try again later. That's the tell. When a company gets caught doing something indefensible and their response is not yet, you know exactly what they think of you. Imagine you're 19. You just built your first serious PC. You saved for months. You install Windows 11. Within the first hour, it's asking for a Microsoft account. It's already sending telemetry. There's an ad in the start menu of a computer you just built with your own hands. You open Task Manager. You watch background Microsoft processes eating your RAM. Processes you didn't install. Processes you can't remove. Processes that exist entirely for Microsoft's benefit, not yours. You go online. You find thousands of people with the same problem. Tutorials on disabling telemetry, but they only work partially. Guides on removing bloatware, but it reinstalls after updates. Workarounds for forced updates, but Microsoft patches them out. The system was designed to be inescapable, so you start building. That's exactly what happened. A small group of anonymous developers, unpaid, working in their spare time, began systematically dismantling Windows. Not to break it, to fix it. They documented every telemetry endpoint, every forced process, every piece of bloatware, every unnecessary service running in the background consuming your hardware for Microsoft's benefit. Then they built AtlasOS, a version of Windows that removes all of it. The surveillance, the bloat, the forced updates, the ads, the mandatory account, gone. What's left is a clean, fast, private operating system that does exactly what you tell it to do, nothing more. The community called it the Windows Microsoft should have built. And the fact that a group of unpaid volunteers had to build it, that's the most damning thing in this entire story. AtlasOS isn't a concept. It's not a mod. It's a fully functional, community-maintained operating system built on top of Windows, and it requires a legitimate Windows license to run. You're not pirating anything. You're just removing what Microsoft added for themselves, and the performance difference is not subtle. According to AtlasOS's own benchmarks, RAM usage at idle drops from an average of 4.2 gigabytes on Windows 11 to under 2 gigabytes on AtlasOS on identical hardware. Boot times are roughly 40% faster. Background CPU usage drops by up to 50%. Over 200 telemetry endpoints are blocked by default. Forced updates are gone. You update when you decide to. The GitHub repository has over 15,000 stars, contributions from developers across 60-plus countries. Regular updates, active documentation, a community that actually responds when something breaks. For gamers, the gains are measurable in frames per second. On the same hardware, AtlasOS users consistently report 15 to 25% higher average FPS in CPU-intensive titles. Not because AtlasOS adds anything, because it removes what Microsoft forced in. Now put that in perspective. Microsoft charges up to $199 for a Windows 11 Pro license. AtlasOS is free. Microsoft employs over 220,000 people and spends billions on Windows development every year. AtlasOS was built by volunteers in their spare time. Microsoft has had 30 years to ship a clean, private, fast operating system. They chose not to. The community did it anyway, on nights and weekends, for nothing. And every person running AtlasOS right now is running Microsoft's own code, stripped of everything Microsoft added for Microsoft's benefit. They can't patch that out. The community moves faster than their legal team. Here's what Microsoft did when hundreds of thousands of people started stripping their operating system down to remove everything they'd built in. Nothing. No statement. No acknowledgement. No attempt to address the privacy concerns that drove people to AtlasOS in the first place. Just silence, and a continued rollout of the exact features people were fleeing. Here's the hypocrisy, stated plainly. The company that built the world's most used operating system decided that spying on its own customers was a feature, not a bug. They called it telemetry. They called it personalization. They called it improving your experience. What they didn't call it was what it was: behavioral surveillance sold to advertisers, running on hardware you paid for, inside software you paid for, without your meaningful consent. And they can't defend that publicly. If they attack AtlasOS, they have to explain why they're defending forced telemetry and ads in a paid OS. If they ignore it, the community grows, so they chose silence. The community grew anyway. Meanwhile, the damage was compounding. Linux desktop adoption hit record highs in 2023 and 2024. Steam's hardware survey showed Linux gaming growing quarter over quarter. Developers who'd spent entire careers on Windows were publicly switching, not because Linux was perfect, because Microsoft had made Windows worse than the alternative. The most valuable users, power users, developers, content creators, the people who influence what everyone else installs, were leaving, and Microsoft's response was to keep adding features nobody asked for and keep removing control nobody wanted to give up. They still haven't learned, and the next wave of people building alternatives is already watching. Here's where things stand. Windows still runs on over 1.4 billion active devices. Microsoft hasn't lost the market, but they've lost something harder to replace than market share. They've lost the trust of the people who know enough to leave. AtlasOS has an active development community, regular updates, and a growing base of users who won't go back. Every single one of them is someone Microsoft pushed away with a decision made in a boardroom. 3 things this story proves. Beyond tech. 1. When you treat paying customers as a product, they'll eventually build an alternative. Microsoft had a monopoly and used it to extract more from users instead of delivering more to them. The community responded the only way it could. 2. The most dangerous competitor isn't a funded startup. It's the person you frustrated enough to spend their weekends fixing what you broke. AtlasOS wasn't marketed. It wasn't funded. It was built out of pure frustration with a company that stopped caring. 3. You can't force loyalty. Microsoft tried to make Windows inescapable. Mandatory accounts, forced updates, telemetry you can't disable. All they did was make the escape more satisfying. If you ever spent an afternoon trying to remove Microsoft's bloatware from your own computer, you were right. If you switched to AtlasOS or Linux, you were right. Microsoft bet that you'd accept whatever they gave you because you had no choice. They were wrong. The question now is whether any company is watching this and learning, or whether the next AtlasOS is already being built in someone's bedroom, because another corporation decided your frustration was an acceptable cost of doing business. What's the one thing you'd remove from Windows if you could? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more stories about the people fighting back against the companies that forgot who they work for, the next one hits even harder.